I thought I was just fixing a broken fence, but her best friend swore I left that gap on purpose. Maybe she was right, because every time Elaine smiled at me, I realized the real cracks weren't in the wood, but in the walls we'd built around ourselves. I never thought much about fences. To me, they were just boards hammered together, meant to separate one space from another. But the day I picked up my tools and walked into Elaine's backyard, that fence became something else entirely. It became the excuse for a story I never saw coming. The morning was warm, sunlight slanting through the branches of tall maples that lined her yard. The boards leaned unevenly, weathered gray and loose from years of storms. I knelt down, hammer in hand, trying to focus on the task. Each nail I drove into the wood echoed in the stillness, sharp and purposeful. I'd only met Elaine a handful of times before, in passing. She was my neighbor, always polite, always poised. At 43, she carried herself with a kind of grace that didn't demand attention, but naturally drew it anyway. She had a way of speaking that was soft, measured, like she was choosing her words as carefully as she chose the books I sometimes saw tucked under her arm. That morning, she came out onto the porch with her best friend, Marianne. Marianne was her opposite in energy, sharp-eyed, quick to tease, a playful spark in every sentence. Elaine carried a tray with 2 mugs of coffee, while Marianne leaned against the rail with a smirk. I felt their eyes on me as I straightened up, brushing sawdust from my hands. Elaine smiled, warm, a little shy, but genuine. "You didn't have to do this," she said, voice carrying just enough over the hammering. The fence could have waited. Before I could answer, Marianne jumped in. "Wait? Please. You've had this fence leaning like a drunk for months. Be grateful this young man showed up to save you." She tilted her head toward me, eyes glinting. "Though, if you ask me, he missed a spot. Maybe on purpose." Her words landed heavier than she intended. I laughed it off, scratching the back of my neck, but something about the way Elaine glanced down, cheeks coloring faintly, made me wonder if Marianne was teasing me, or teasing her. The truth was, I had noticed more than a fence. The way sunlight caught in Elaine's hair, the delicate way she balanced the tray, even the faint trace of lavender in the air when she passed by, it was hard not to notice. Still, I kept my head down, driving nails in straight lines, telling myself I was just here to fix boards, nothing more. But fences don't just separate, they invite curiosity about what lies on the other side. And in those first few moments, I realized this wasn't about wood or nails at all. It was about walls, hers, mine, and whether either of us was willing to let a single gap remain. Marianne's laughter rang out again, breaking the quiet, and Elaine shook her head with an embarrassed smile. I went back to work, though my hands suddenly felt less steady. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was repairing a fence or about to cross one. The fence creaked under my weight as I leaned back, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. The sun had climbed higher, pressing heat against my shoulders, and the steady rhythm of hammering had left my palms raw. I didn't notice Elaine until her shadow stretched across the grass beside me. She carried a tall glass of water, beads of condensation slipping down the sides. "You should take a break," she said softly. "You'll wear yourself out in this heat." I straightened, suddenly aware of how disheveled I must have looked, shirt sticking to my back, hands dusted with wood shavings. But when she held out the glass, I forgot about all of that. Her fingers brushed mine as I took it, the slightest, unplanned touch. It should have been nothing, but in that instant, my pulse stumbled. The glass was cool, relief against my skin. I raised it to my lips, grateful, but more than the water, it was her presence that settled into me. Elaine lingered a moment longer than necessary, her eyes resting on the half-mended boards, then flicking back to me. "You're very precise," she said. "Most people would have just patched it up any old way." I shrugged, trying to keep my voice light. "If I'm going to do something, I want it to last." Marianne, who'd been perched at the porch railing, gave a pointed laugh. "He's not just building fences. He's making statements. Next thing you know, he'll be writing poetry on the boards." Elaine gave her friend a look, half scolding, half amused, and I caught the faintest trace of a blush coloring her cheeks. The teasing was harmless, but I could sense the undertone. Marianne noticed things. Maybe too much. I sipped again, letting the cold water slide down, though what I really noticed was the warmth radiating from Elaine. The way she stood with her shoulders back, but her eyes a little unsure, as if she wasn't used to someone doing things for her without asking anything in return. I handed the glass back, fingers brushing hers a second time, and this time neither of us moved away too quickly. A small pause long enough to register, not long enough to call attention to. "Thank you," I said. Her smile was quiet, almost private. "You're welcome." For a moment, the noise of the world seemed to shrink, the cicadas in the trees, the breeze through the leaves, even Marianne's sarcastic hum fading into the background. All that remained was the silence stretching between us, filled with something unspoken. Of course, it didn't last. Marianne leaned in with a grin, breaking the spell. "Careful, Elaine. He might start missing more spots just so you'll bring him water again." Elaine rolled her eyes, laughing under her breath. But I noticed she didn't deny it. And when her gaze returned to me, softer than before, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe Marianne wasn't entirely wrong. I bent back down to the fence, nails clutched tighter than before, telling myself to focus. But my hands weren't steady. Because the truth was, this wasn't about wood and nails anymore. It was about the way a simple glass of water had left me thirstier than before, though not for the drink. The afternoon stretched on, and with each nail I drove into the fence, I told myself I was here for the work. Just the work. Still, I couldn't ignore the feeling of being watched. Every so often, when I glanced up, I'd catch Marianne smirking from the porch or Elaine looking quickly away, pretending to be busy with the flowers she'd set on the table. I shifted down the line of crooked boards, testing one with my hand. It wobbled just enough that I'd need to brace it. I pressed it flat, holding it steady. The quiet moment broke when Marianne's voice rang out across the yard. "You missed a spot," she called, her words wrapped in playful accusation. Or was that intentional? The way she said it, light and knowing, sent a flush creeping up my neck. Elaine turned toward her friend, brows raised in mild protest. "Marianne." Her voice carried warning, but there was laughter tugging at the edges. I shook my head, forcing a chuckle. "I swear, I'm fixing them all. No strategy involved." But Marianne wasn't letting go. She leaned on the porch railing, chin resting on her hand, her eyes sharp with amusement. "MHM. You know, some people leave a flaw just so they have a reason to come back." The words hung in the air, heavier than her tone suggested. Elaine exhaled, somewhere between exasperation and embarrassment, and busied herself with straightening the tray she'd brought earlier. But her hands lingered too long on the same cup, her movements betraying a flicker of nerves. I forced my gaze back to the fence, the wood rough beneath my fingers. The hammer slipped once, striking off center, and I muttered under my breath. Maybe it was the sun, or maybe it was the way Marianne's teasing cut closer than I wanted to admit. Still, I couldn't ignore the truth hiding inside the joke. Because the thought of coming back, of finding another excuse to be here, wasn't unwelcome. Elaine's voice finally broke the silence, softer than before. "Don't listen to her. She enjoys stirring things up." I risked a glance over my shoulder. Elaine stood with her arms folded loosely, her smile apologetic, but her eyes betrayed her. They lingered on me longer than they should have, warmth flickering there that she probably didn't intend for me to notice. "I can handle it," I said lightly, though my heart was beating too fast for the calm tone I tried to keep. Besides, maybe she's right. Maybe perfection isn't always the goal. Marianne laughed, delighted with herself, but Elaine shook her head again, cheeks flushed now in a way no summer heat could explain. The fence stood straighter with every board I secured, yet in that moment, it felt like something else was shifting too, something less visible, harder to keep upright. When Marianne disappeared inside for a moment, the yard grew quieter, the tension lingering like the scent of sawdust and sun-warmed earth. Elaine's gaze drifted back to me softer, unguarded. For a breath, I thought she might say something. But she didn't. She only smiled, small and knowing, before looking away. And I realized then that Marianne's teasing wasn't just noise. It was a mirror, reflecting back what we were both trying not to admit, that some gaps aren't accidents at all. By the time the sun dipped lower, The fence was standing straighter than it had in years. My shoulders ached, palms raw from gripping tools all day, but there was a quiet satisfaction in seeing the boards lined up evenly, like a row of soldiers finally at attention. Marian had slipped out earlier, her laughter fading down the driveway with the sound of her car engine. The yard felt different without her voice cutting through it. Quieter, softer, as if the evening had been waiting for just the two of us. Elaine stepped onto the porch, a shawl draped lightly over her shoulders. She carried a mug of tea this time, steam curling into the cooling air. The porch light flicked on, casting a golden glow across her face. She looked at the fence first, then at me. "You've done more in one day than I've managed in months," she said with a small smile. "Thank you. Really." I set the hammer down, brushing sawdust from my hands. It wasn't a big deal. Just some wooden nails. Her smile softened, but there was something guarded in it. She leaned against the porch rail, cradling her mug. "It is a big deal. I don't usually let people do things for me." Her words hung there, more personal than she probably meant them to be. I nodded, unsure how much to press. "Guess fences aren't the only things you like to keep standing on your own." She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "Something like that." Silence settled, not uncomfortable, but heavy with things unspoken. The hum of crickets filled the background, the air carrying that faint sweetness of grass cooling after a hot day. I sat on the step below her, looking up. It wasn't lost on me how the small distance between us made her seem both close and out of reach. After a moment, she said, "Marian teases too much." "I'm sorry if she embarrassed you." "She didn't," I replied honestly. "If anything, she just says out loud what the rest of us are too careful to admit." Elaine stilled, fingers tightening slightly around her mug. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out toward the trees at the edge of the yard, her profile outlined in the porch light. For a second, I thought I saw something vulnerable there, like she was caught between wanting to step forward and knowing she shouldn't. I shifted, resting my elbows on my knees. "I don't mind the teasing," I added. "I just don't want to make things complicated for you." Her gaze returned to me then, steady, searching. She seemed to weigh my words, as though deciding how much truth she could bear to let slip. Finally, she set the mug down on the railing, her hand brushing against mine as she moved past to sit beside me. It was a small touch, fleeting but enough. Enough to feel the warmth of her skin, enough to notice she didn't immediately pull away. "I think," she said quietly, "that sometimes complicated is just another word for honest." The porch light flickered slightly, moths batting against it. And in that fragile, imperfect glow, I realized we weren't just talking about fences anymore. We were talking about walls. Hers. Mine. And maybe, just maybe, the chance to take one down. The last of the daylight stretched across the yard in fading streaks of orange, painting long shadows against the fence. Most of the boards now stood firm, though one section near the back still leaned stubbornly, resisting every effort I'd made earlier. I walked over to it, running my hand along the grain of the wood, rough and uneven under my fingertips. Elaine followed, her shawl drawn a little tighter around her shoulders as the air cooled. "That one has been a problem for years," she said, standing a few steps away. "I think the post sunk too deep after the last storm." I bent, testing the wobble, pressing my palm flat against the board. "It's fixable," I murmured, though my voice sounded less certain than before. Without thinking, Elaine stepped closer, placing her hand against the same board to feel it give under the pressure. For a heartbeat, we stood side by side, our hands nearly touching on the wood. Then, without warning, her fingers brushed across mine, a glancing contact, light but enough to jolt something inside me. Neither of us moved right away. The evening air grew still, heavy, as if even the crickets had paused their song. My hand twitched, wanting to curl around hers, to close that gap, but I held back. The silence stretched, charged with something neither of us wanted to name. She was the first to shift, pulling her hand back slowly, but not before her knuckles grazed mine one last time. She exhaled softly, a sound closer to a sigh than words. "It's silly, isn't it?" she said, almost to herself. "Getting flustered over a piece of wood." I swallowed, forcing a laugh that didn't come out steady. Maybe it's not about the wood. Her eyes flicked to mine then, sharp and searching. For a second, I thought I had said too much. But instead of stepping further away, she stayed, her gaze lingering. The space between us felt fragile, like the fence itself, barely holding together under its own weight. She looked away first, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're young," she whispered, as though reminding herself. "You should be thinking about things other than fixing fences for neighbors." I said quietly. "I am thinking about other things." The words slipped out before I could stop them. I wanted to take them back, or at least soften them, but Elaine's expression froze, and for a moment I couldn't tell if she was hurt, surprised, or simply fighting something she didn't want to show. The board creaked under our joined pressure, snapping me back to the moment. I pressed it harder, focusing on the task. "I'll brace it tomorrow," I muttered. "It'll hold better then." She nodded, stepping back finally, her composure settling over her like a shield. But when she turned toward the porch, she hesitated, glancing at me one last time. Her eyes carried that same unspoken weight from before, a look that said she knew exactly what I had meant, even if neither of us dared to admit it aloud. The fence groaned softly in the breeze, leaning but still standing. Just like us. The next evening I came back to finish the job. The tools were the same, the boards were the same, but the air between us felt different, as if something had shifted in that silence by the leaning post. Elaine was already outside, tending to her garden when I arrived. She greeted me with a smile that was polite, careful, though her eyes carried the faintest hesitation, like she was still replaying yesterday's near touch. I tried to focus on the fence. Each strike of the hammer echoed through the quiet yard, steady, grounding. But then Marianne's car pulled into the driveway, and I knew peace wouldn't last long. She stepped out, sunglasses pushed into her hair, grin already tugging at her lips. "So," she said loudly, sauntering toward us, "is the fence perfect yet, or are you leaving a few boards loose just to make sure Elaine keeps bringing you drinks?" Elaine let out a breath, somewhere between laughter and exasperation. "Marianne." But Marianne only smirked, looking between us with too much awareness. "Don't mind me. Just saying what's obvious." I forced a smile, keeping my head down, but my heart wasn't steady. Because obvious or not, her words cut close to something I couldn't keep pretending didn't exist. After a while, Marianne disappeared inside, leaving the two of us alone again. Elaine stood near the porch, her shawl draped loosely around her shoulders. The golden light of dusk fell across her face, softening every line, every detail. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "She's not entirely wrong," she said quietly. I froze, hammer halfway to the nail. "About what?" Her eyes dropped to the ground, then back up to mine, steady this time. "About you leaving things unfinished. About why you're here." The hammer slipped from my hand, landing in the grass with a dull thud. My chest felt too tight, like the air had thickened around us. "Elaine," I started, but my voice cracked on her name. She lifted a hand, brushing hair back from her face, though her fingers trembled just slightly. "I don't know what you think this is," she whispered. "But it can't be simple." "It isn't simple for me." I stepped closer, slowly, careful not to close the distance too fast. "I don't want to make things complicated for you. I hesitated, then let it out. I can't help being drawn to you. It's not about the fence. It's not about excuses. It's just you." Her breath caught, so quiet I almost missed it. She didn't move away this time. Her hand tightened around her shawl, pulling it closer, like she was protecting herself, but she stayed right there. For a long second, neither of us spoke. The sound of cicadas filled the silence, the faint breeze carrying the smell of cut grass and lavender. And in that pause, I realized we had crossed into something we couldn't easily retreat from. Elaine's voice was low when she finally spoke. "I don't know where this goes. But you're right. It was never just about the fence." And in that confession, soft and trembling, I heard the truth neither of us could keep buried anymore. Night had fully settled by the time I packed away the tools. The fence, at last, stood steady, every board aligned, every nail driven firm. From a distance it looked perfect, though up close I could still see faint seams, tiny reminders of where it had once been broken. Elaine sat on the porch steps, shawl wrapped loosely around her shoulders, her posture quiet but not closed off. I joined her, lowering myself beside her, close enough that our shoulders brushed. The warmth of her presence was subtle but unmistakable, a kind of heat that had nothing to do with the summer air. For a while, neither of us spoke. The yard was alive with the night's orchestra, crickets chirping, cicadas humming, the distant call of a lone owl. Above us, the sky stretched wide, scattered with stars, while the moon painted her profile in silver. She finally broke the silence. "It looks strong again," she said softly, eyes fixed on the fence. I followed her gaze. "It'll hold for years, if the storms aren't too harsh." Her lips curved into a small smile. If only everything in life could be mended so easily. The words lingered, heavier than the air around us. I turned, studying her face in the glow of the porch light, the delicate crease at the corner of her eyes, the strength in the way she held herself, the softness she rarely let slip. "You don't have to fix everything alone," I said. "Not all the time." She tilted her head toward me, eyes searching mine. "And you think you can help me with that?" I gave a half smile, more honest than bold. "I'd like to try." A breeze moved through the yard, carrying with it the faint scent of cut grass and the lavender she always planted near the porch. In that moment, she placed her hand gently over mine. It wasn't claiming, wasn't desperate. Just a quiet acknowledgement that she had heard me, that she understood, and that maybe she didn't want to carry everything alone anymore. I didn't move, didn't tighten my hold. I just let her rest her hand there, the warmth of it enough to steady the racing in my chest. "I don't know what this is," she admitted, voice trembling slightly. "I don't know where it could lead, or if it should lead anywhere at all." Her honesty cut through the night, sharp and fragile all at once. But I nodded, because I understood. "It doesn't have to be defined tonight," I said. "It can just be." She closed her eyes briefly, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath all day. When she opened them again, she leaned slightly into me, her shoulder pressing firmer against mine. Not a confession, not a promise, but closeness, simple, undeniable. We sat like that for a long time, saying nothing more. The world carried on around us, the hum of the night, the faint groan of the fence in the wind. And maybe tomorrow, there would be questions, doubts, complications. But for tonight, there was this, the quiet truth of two people sitting side by side, not certain of what the future held, but certain that something real had begun. And in that silence, it was enough.